This Asian Kim Kardashian and her boyfriend shot their former business partners. They threw a toxic substance that permanently changed a poor lady's life just because she was an ex-girlfriend. This so-called pastor stole over $1 million in merchandise from the Home Depot. Who are a few of the other most despicable criminals around? Let's find out, starting with number 6, Despicable Dealings. In an update to a story we've previously covered, Oliver Karafa and Lucy Li, both from Toronto, were sentenced to life in prison for orchestrating a plan that led to the loss of Tyler Pratt's life and left his partner, Jordyn Romano, gravely injured. The case, filled with betrayal and sinister plans, drew national attention, finally ending in a dramatic courtroom conclusion. Karafa and Li were business associates of Pratt and Romano, at first presenting themselves as trusted partners. Pratt, a father of 2, traveled to Ontario to meet Karafa and Li, who had arranged a meeting at a warehouse in a place called Stony Creek. They claimed the warehouse would be used to start a grow operation involving a certain plant, but it was later revealed that this meeting was actually a trap. Pratt, who was also seeking repayment of millions he had invested with Karafa, was completely unaware that the pair had no intention of ever returning the money. The real plan was just to eliminate both Pratt and Romano. The evening unfolded with chilling precision. According to Romano's testimony, she and Li were sitting in a vehicle outside the warehouse, supposedly waiting for a real estate agent to arrive. At some point, Li stepped out of the car, leaving Romano inside while Pratt and Karafa stood nearby outside the vehicle. Li, stepping out, appeared to signal Karafa to act. Karafa then discharged a firearm he had brought, targeting first Pratt and then Romano. Romano sustained critical injuries but managed to crawl to the road and flag down help. Tragically, Pratt, who was targeted alongside her, didn't survive the incident. To make matters worse, Romano, who was 13 weeks pregnant at the time, also lost the pregnancy due to her injuries. Karafa and Li's preparation included creating false alibis by swapping Li's phone's SIM card and getting rid of key evidence, such as vehicles tied to the crime. After realizing Romano had survived, they fled the country, leading to an international manhunt that ended with their arrest in Hungary. Romano, who survived the harrowing ordeal despite being critically injured, was obviously a critical witness in the trial. She provided testimony recounting the events, which were corroborated by surveillance footage and other evidence. Romano shared that she still faces physical and emotional scars, but expressed gratitude for her survival. So ultimately, Li and Karafa were given life in prison. The sentencing was a somber moment for Pratt's family, who described him as a devoted father and beloved son. While they may feel some relief about the sentence, it likely brings little solace, because while Li and Karafa received harsh punishments, it still pales in comparison to what that family lost. Number 5. Bitcoin Kidnapping. Tianfu Guo, a 35-year-old Chinese national, was sentenced to 12 years in prison for orchestrating the dramatic kidnapping of a wealthy businessman. His ransom demand? $15 million in Bitcoin. But what unfolded during the harrowing 2-day ordeal revealed a chilling plan that left investigators racing against time. Chinese businessman Dylan Huang was enjoying a round of golf at a high-end course one day when 5 men rushed him and forced him into a black Audi in broad daylight. The group took him to a secluded vacation rental where he was held in a small cage. His captors then demanded $15 million in Bitcoin for his release. During his captivity, Huang endured tough conditions. Meanwhile, investigators were already closing in. Acting on witness accounts and surveillance footage, police tracked the kidnappers' vehicle, leading them to a guy named Tianfu Guo. He was arrested the following evening in London's Chinatown. Inside his car, police found an SD card containing surveillance footage of the victim, directly tying him to the crime. Shortly after Guo's arrest, the kidnappers released Huang in a remote area, likely to avoid further attention. Injured and blindfolded, Huang managed to find his way to a nearby house, where he called the police. He was later taken to a hospital and has since made a full physical recovery. Although Guo has been sentenced to 12 years in prison, some suspects remain at large, believed to have fled the UK. Law enforcement continues to pursue those responsible, working to ensure everyone involved is brought to justice. It's crazy how the kidnappers handled their demands and escape. Despite their ridiculous demand of $15 million in Bitcoin, they released Huang immediately after Guo was arrested, even though no ransom was paid. It's as if their entire operation unraveled the moment Guo was caught, and they panicked and decided to just abandon the scheme entirely. And the fact that Guo kept surveillance footage of the victim on an SD card in his car was about as stupid as you can get. It sounds like Huang was lucky, because that whole situation could have gone in a very different direction. Number 4. Risky business. Robert Pooley, a 49-year-old from Encampo, California, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for running unauthorized skydiving courses at a facility that already had a troubled history. Despite having his certification suspended in 2015, Pooley continued training over 100 new instructors at the Lodi Parachute Center using a digital signature from a certified examiner to falsely validate his courses. Each participant paid approximately $1,100 for the training. And the facility that Pooley worked at, unsurprisingly, was known for its lack of strict regulations and has been tied to 28 incidents since the mid-1980s. These included parachutes failing to deploy properly, mid-air collisions, and hard landings that led to severe injuries. Reports also talked about outdated equipment and insufficient oversight, raising broader concerns about the center's overall safety practices. And despite these incidents, the facility continued to operate, drawing criticism for its handling of high-risk activities. Pooley's fraudulent practices came under scrutiny after 2 students, Yang Quan and Tyler Turner, lost their lives during a tandem jump back in 2016. The incident prompted an investigation into the facility, which exposed Pooley's fraudulent practices and led to his eventual conviction for wire fraud. Pooley's actions extended beyond forgery. When victims of his scheme sought refunds following the tragedy, he refused to repay them. Meanwhile, Tyler Turner's family pursued a civil lawsuit against the facility's owner, resulting in a $40 million judgment they reportedly have yet to collect. Pooley was sentenced to 2 years in prison, making a rare legal resolution for the center, which somehow continues to operate despite its controversial track record. We do think, in most reasonable cases, fun comes first and safety comes second. But this opinion refers more to doing generally somewhat dangerous things, such as trying to slip and slide down a hill, then flying off a small cliff and launching into a lake. That opinion does not, and never will, apply when we're jumping out of a plane. In cases like that, it's safety first, second, third, and fifth. If the Google reviews of a skydiving facility even casually mentions lax safety protocols or a history of accidents, that's not a place we're going to skydive from. It's weird that they're even still in business. Number 3, faking charity. Candace Leard, formerly known as Candace Rivera, the founder of Utah's anti-trafficking nonprofit Exodus, was sentenced to at least 3 years in prison. Her sentencing follows a series of embezzlement schemes that defrauded donors and volunteers alike. But behind the courtroom drama lies a deeper story of betrayal and the impact of her actions. Leard's legal troubles stem from over 30 felony charges, including theft, fraud, and forgery. As CEO of Exodus, she solicited over $1.6 million in donations, claiming the funds supported anti-trafficking efforts and rescue operations. Instead, investigators uncovered that the funds actually supported personal luxuries, including homes, cars, and vacations. She even fabricated credentials, falsely presenting herself as a nurse and a United Nations employee to bolster her credibility. Her schemes extended to manipulating friends, colleagues, and even indigenous communities for financial gain. Victims such as Aura Argyle, a former assistant, shared how Leard exploited their trust, leaving emotional and financial devastation. Leard opened credit accounts in others' names, leaving them to deal with the ruined credit and unpaid debts. Despite pleading no contest to multiple charges, Leard used her court appearance to shift focus to her own difficulties, whining about her significant personal hardship since her arrest. However, Judge Christine Johnson roundly criticized this approach, calling her statements tone-deaf and emphasizing that the harm done to her victims far outweighed her claimed struggles. During the passing down of the 3-year prison sentence, the court heard powerful impact statements from victims, many of whom had invested time and resources into Exodus, truly believing in its mission to combat people trafficking. Volunteers, survivors, and donors detailed how their trust, stories, and funds were exploited for personal gain. Some even questioned whether any of Exodus's purported rescue operations were genuine. After the hearing, victims gathered to share their experiences and support one another, finding solace in their shared pursuit of justice. While reflecting on the betrayal they endured, they were satisfied with the outcome and began the process of moving forward together. It's crazy to think that someone leading a company dedicated to helping victims of some of the worst crimes imaginable would use donated money to treat herself. This wasn't just a case of ripping off a business. She was stealing from people who had been kidnapped and exploited. How does someone like that even sleep at night, let alone enjoy a vacation? We suppose it's easy if you don't have a conscience. Number 2, the worst association. William D. Bernardino, a 49-year-old from Boynton Beach, Florida, was charged alongside 2 others for their roles in a terrible crime that left a 42-year-old woman with severe burns over much of her body. But what drove D. Bernardino to orchestrate such a vicious act? And how were the suspects tracked down? Authorities say D. Bernardino hired Betty Jo Lane, 38, and Jamar McNeil, 39, from Jacksonville, Florida, to carry out the task. Lane and McNeil rented a car and drove over 900 miles to southern New Jersey. The victim, who had just returned home from work, was targeted as she exited her car. Lane approached and threw a cup of highly caustic substance at her, causing burns to 35% of her body. Lane fled the scene in the rental car, which became a key lead. Investigators traced it to a Florida rental agency, linking the suspects to the vehicle. Authorities think the act was premeditated, with Lane and McNeil hired specifically to go after the victim. D. Bernardino was allegedly the orchestrator and was apparently motivated by the fact that he was dumped, something he clearly didn't take well. The arrests required coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies across state lines. Apparently, it's a bit tricky when multiple states are involved. Investigators worked together to track down D. Bernardino and his accomplices, who were located and taken into custody in Florida. The U.S. Marshal Service also assisted in the operation, ensuring all 3 suspects were apprehended swiftly. The suspects were taken into custody in Florida and are expected to be transferred to New Jersey to face charges. Investigators gathered substantial evidence linking the trio to the incident. Key pieces include the rental car used in the act, traced back to a Florida agency, and directly connected to Betty Jo Lane and Jamar McNeil. Travel records revealed the pair drove over 900 miles from Florida to New Jersey just days before. Additionally, authorities believe William D. Bernardino paid Lane and McNeil to carry out the crime, further tying him to the scheme. While the case is ongoing as of the release of this video, these findings leave little doubt about the premeditation and exactly who is involved. As the victim continues her recovery, it's looking like these 3 are going to be put away for a long time. Number 1. Anointed Liquidator. Robert Dell, a former pastor in Florida, has been charged in connection with a large-scale retail theft operation. Authorities allege Dell and his accomplices stole over $1.4 million worth of merchandise from Home Depot stores across Central Florida, selling the items through an eBay store called Anointed Liquidator. The operation reportedly involved several individuals, including Dell's wife Jacqueline and his mother Karen. The allegations paint a picture of an elaborate operation. Prosecutors claim 2 accomplices would visit multiple Home Depot locations daily, stealing high-value items, for example, power tools from brands such as Milwaukee and DeWalt. The stolen goods were then delivered to Dell, who allegedly coordinated their sale online. Dell's wife and his mother are accused of assisting with shipping the items and managing the eBay account, which had been active since 2011 and reportedly sold 35,000 products before being shut down. Investigators believe the theft ring operated for several years, targeting stores across 7 counties. Home Depot's loss prevention team and Florida's Organized Retail Crime Exchange Task Force worked together to track the suspects. The operation's scope was significant, with Home Depot estimating that its losses could total as much $5 million. Authorities accused Dell of exploiting his roles as both a pastor and the operator of a church-affiliated halfway house by involving many residents in the thefts. One accomplice reportedly claimed to have earned up to $10,000 a day while working with Dell. In addition to the theft charges, Dell is also facing allegations of dealing in stolen property and conspiracy to commit racketeering. His wife and his mother have also been charged with conspiracy and property theft. Bail was set at $750,000 for Dell and $250,000 for each of his accomplices. Following Dell's arrest, the Rock Church, where he previously served, publicly distanced itself from him, explaining that he hadn't been their pastor for several years. Meanwhile, the investigation has drawn attention to the growing issue of organized retail theft, which costs U.S. retailers billions annually. It's pretty crazy to think that Dell was able to keep this thing going for so long, to the point that he stole possibly $5 million worth of stuff. Like, that's a lot of stuff to steal for him to end up earning that much over 10 years. You'd think with the number of people likely involved over the years, someone would have turned him in. But we suppose, with someone claiming to have been making $10,000 a day, silence really is golden. Click to watch one of these next videos.